You're listening to the Tax Bits podcast, where we provide bite-sized tax updates and news that impact you and your loved ones. As always, you can find show notes and resources for each episode at cartaxlaw.com. Now, here's your host, Jason Carr.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today for this inaugural episode of the Tax Bits podcast. So what I'm going to do is every month I'm going to put out a podcast episode featuring a specific tax question that I'm asked daily in my tax practice. And I'm going to delve into it a little bit further, but I am going to try to keep it concise. That's the idea, that, keep this down to 10 to 15 minutes. Everyone's busy these days. And so I want to be able to have something out there that if you have a specific question, you can get an answer in a relatively quick amount of time and a format that'll help you. So because we're in the middle of tax season, I thought what I would do is I would do the first episode and discuss how you ask the IRS for more time to file your tax return. Now, granted, we're in the middle of tax season, so I encourage you that if you haven't done your taxes yet, to try to file them on time. But if for some reason circumstances require you to ask for an extension or something, I want to discuss, what you need to do to take care of that. So first thing is, time is money. We hear that saying all the time. So if you don't have the time, it will cost you some money. But once again, the friendly folks at the IRS have thought of a way to cut you a little slack when it comes to filing your income tax return. Now, while we have an extra month this year when the usual April 15th deadline rolls around, there's no law that says you have to file. Okay, it's sort of a rule, but the IRS will give you an extra 6 months if you ask nicely. Of course, taxes are usually due by April 15th, an ominous date for Americans. However, this year, the deadlines have been set back to June 15th for anyone impacted by the severe winter storms in Texas, Louisiana, and Oklahoma. As a Texan, I suffered through that, and so I'm for one glad to have the extra time to file my taxes. It was horrible. For these businesses and individuals who qualify, there's no need to request an extension. So as long as you can file by June the 15th, you're good. You don't have to request the extension. Now, everyone else, with the exception of corporations, also been allowed extra time. The IRS has moved the deadline back to May 17th due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. As with everything dealing with the IRS, you should be aware of the fine print when you request an extension. Here are 3 important things to know. An extension does not give you any extension of time to pay your taxes. They're still due like everyone else. Number 2, it's a good idea to estimate and pay any taxes you owe by the normal deadline to avoid possible penalties. And number 3, you're required to file an extension of time before the regular due date of your return. So, for instance, if you have the May 17th deadline, you need to make sure that if you're going to file an extension, you do it before that deadline. Okay? So you might be asking, what happens when you ask the IRS for an extension? Well, the process is pretty easy. You use the IRS Form 4868 to receive the additional 6 months all in one shot. So the new deadline to file a tax return in a normal year would be October 15th. And even though the taxes for 2020 are still due no later than May 17th or June 15th if you're in one of the 3 states I mentioned earlier, obtaining an extension of time to file in October doesn't give you any additional time to pay. The IRS will still charge interest and probably penalties on tax payments made after the applicable due date, just like I just mentioned. So if you're going to file an extension, you might want to, like I said, you may want to go ahead and make payments if you can, just to offset some of the penalties and interest later. And if you're going to do that, you might be asking, well, how do I do that if I'm not going to file my taxes? Well, it's not an easy process, but it's probably worth it in terms of savings. First, you need to create a rough draft of your tax return. This will give you some idea whether you'll receive a refund or owe taxes. And even if you don't plan on filing your return by the original due date, it's still a good practice to do this. Now, if you don't think you'll be able to pay by your applicable tax date, you might think about applying for a payment plan, an offering compromise, or another type of structured payment option with the IRS. Just FYI, in the coming months, I'm going to be talking about these in further detail on this podcast. So if this is something you're interested in, tune in. You're probably going to hear something that's going to help you if you're in this situation. Now, if you use tax preparation software like TurboTax, TaxSlayer, TaxAct, these programs will usually help you e-file the 4868 at no charge. You need to provide the required information and make certain that this is completed and filed prior to midnight on the deadline day. And that deadline is, again, the deadlines I gave you earlier. So figure on 5 to 20 minutes to complete the extension and file it online. Use that estimate to give yourself plenty of time to get it done before the midnight deadline. Now, if you like to use the post office, the IRS provides a list of mailing addresses for sending the 4868. If you use the mail, an extension request must be postmarked on or before the May 17th or June 15th deadline, whichever one applies to your situation. Now, if you're going to use snail mail, it's smart to send the extension form by certified mail with a return receipt request. The return receipt is evidence you have, in fact, sent in the extension request and when you send it in. And I got to tell you, with COVID and everything, the IRS has millions of documents stockpiled that have not been processed. I've got clients with tax returns that we filed for past years 6-9 months ago that haven't been processed. So whenever you send in your extension, the likelihood that they're even going to review it before October, before the deadline even comes around, is very, very small. But if you have that return receipt in your records, then you can prove it if it comes up. Finally, you should mail a check with the extension form if you owe taxes. If not, mail only the form. So again, if you think you're going to owe and you can pay some, go ahead and do it. It'll save you down the road. Another option is to use the IRS Direct Pay website to pay if you're filing the form 4868 online. Also, some of the software providers are equipped to permit you to pay by direct debit from a bank account when you file for your extension. So you might want to look into that. Now, for those of you who live abroad in other countries, you are able to ask for additional time to file beyond the initial October 15th extension in some circumstances. However, you must file an additional form. So in addition to requesting the first extension on Form 4868 that I just mentioned, you also had to do a second extension, which is filed on Form 2350. The second form requests additional time to file Form 1040. It's essentially allowing expatriates to qualify for special tax treatment. But note that without an extension, those of you living abroad must still file your tax return by April 15th, just like the rest of us. Okay, everyone, so that's the first episode. I hope you like this. I'll get better at this. I'm not a professional speaker or anything. I'm just a lowly tax attorney, but I do like talking about this stuff. And so if you like the podcast, make sure you subscribe to whatever system or whatever platform you're on, your platform of choice. I'll get this on Apple, iTunes, and Google Podcasts and others. So make sure you subscribe. Also, if you have a question that you want me to cover in an episode, please feel free to send it to me. You can reach out to via my website at cartaxlaw.com. You can reach me on any of the social platforms. You can DM me. However you found this podcast, there'll be something shown on the platform that'll explain how to reach me. So that's it. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll be back next month. Have a good one, everyone.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, please tell your friends and colleagues to visit cartaxlaw.com. cartaxlaw.com. Thanks for listening, and be sure to tune in next time for another edition of the Tax Bits podcast.